give you a part of them. So I'm going to ask you again, are you here with me right now? Beautiful. I spoke earlier, and I don't know if everybody was here, but I did have a lot to say, and I do have a lot to say on the issues of immigration. I grew up in Miami, Florida, between Miami and New York, watching Cuban people being able to come in and Haitian people sent back. And I think it's important that we confront the issues of colorism within immigration, because I think a lot of times the erasure of Blackness in immigration is something that we turn a blind eye to, but it is very much a part of our fight. And you can clap. Black people deserve you to clap. Don't clap, Black people. Let them clap for you. I am a Puerto Rican Dominican woman. I identify as Afro-Indigenous, very proud of my African and Taino roots. And I give grace and thank very much the people of Haiti who kicked down the door for our liberation. Every day, all day, any day. Those are my brothers and sisters. I'm half Dominican, so I know I have Haitian blood. I hope I do, because that means it justifies the warrior that lives in me. Because Toussaint Louverture was no joke, and neither is Aida Rodriguez. So, if you don't know who that is, you need to look it up and say thank you. I wanted to come here today to speak briefly just on behalf of the people who you don't see. Indigenous people, First Nations people, Native people who are often shoved to the side. We want to say thank you, because thanks to them, we are on this sacred land. And I always say thank you. I always say thank you to the original people of this land who had to deal with illegal immigration a long time ago in the most brutal way. I think it's important for us to use our voices. As a stand-up comedian, I have a HBO Max special coming out on November 4th, and you will see a lot of these. It may be a shameless plug, but I'll tell you what, you will hear a lot of what I'm talking about now in my comedy special. So I don't know who's gonna cancel me first, but I look forward to being canceled if I get canceled in the name of truth and power to my people and all the beautiful people that belong to the spectrum that make us all who we are. And when we talk about Latinx, Latine, and Latinos, when we exclude Blackness from that, we are participating in violence and in harmful language, because there are many Indigenous, Asian, Black people who belong to the Latino, Latinx, Latine spectrum. And so we have to remember that. Every single one of us use our privilege to make sure that those who suffer more than us get their just due. And I will always work for that. The mother of 2 Black children, it is important for me that those two know where they come from. And the reason why they try to erase our history, because we don't come from slaves and the conquered. We come from kings and queens, chiefs, and the people, the great people of our past. And let us never forget that. Don't have shame when it comes to who you come from, because what you come from is great. If it wasn't, they wouldn't try to bury it. They wouldn't try to drown us and send us back, and they surely wouldn't erase our history so that we wouldn't know it. So I stand on the shoulders of the great ancestors that I thank every night, as I pray to every night. My grandmother was a queen and a warrior, and I am so thankful. And she not only gave me my name, but she reminded me where I came from, and not let a history book bring me shame in thinking that I come from slaves and the conquered. I had to get that in there, because I wouldn't be me if I didn't. Words are important. Be very intentional. Those of you who believe in the Bible know that it says life and death are in the power of the tongue. But we all know that the universe agrees with a made-up mind, and everything that comes out of our mouth should be intentional, and we should use them to give voice to the things that are important when it comes to our progress, our prosperity, and our humanity. I am honored to bring this next artist to the stage. As a stand-up comedian, poets and comics, We are like the blue collar workers of the entertainment business, but we have so much to do with what happens in society because we actually use our own words to speak to what's happening in the world. And as a Afro Indigenous woman, I am honored to bring to the stage this woman who is of Cuban and Jamaican descent. That's power all by itself. But she is known to be the youngest poet to have ever become the New Yorican Poets Cafe Grand Slam champion at the age of 19. And that's a big deal to us who are of Puerto Rican descent, those of us that are from New York, that are Dominican. If you don't know about it, you should look it up. She's also an activist. She's been an active participant in the Say Her Name campaign, which highlighted police brutality against Black women. She is a contributor to the anthology New Daughters of Africa, with poems about love and intimacy as a primary aspect of freedom fighting. And she was nominated for an NAACP award for outstanding literary work. For her poetry collection, My Mother Was a Freedom Fighter. I am honored, and you should be too. I want you to put your hands together and give great energy and love to Aida Monet. And don't stop clapping until she reaches this stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yesterday I had the privilege of reciting poems for a room full of young people, and I got a little choked up. And this whole weekend I've been choked up because I don't want to begin without naming that we are in a pandemic and we have endured the pandemic that is poverty and ignorance and lack of imagination for far too long. And to be able to gather, I hope that we do not take it lightly, that we must continue to find ways to show up and connect across borders, across boundaries, across limitations, across insecurities, doubts, and fears. And so to see you all here today, it really chokes me up. It makes me very emotional. So I just want to give it up for you all continuing to rise to the occasion. So please give yourself a round of applause for being here. Many of us did not survive. So every day that we have a chance to wake up, I pray you are in gratitude. The first poem I'm going to read, I wrote this morning. It doesn't have a title. Huddled in the homes beneath hovering helicopters, blood blazing across the body boulevards in Brazil. A scream licks the eye out of this war with wants. We wobble into wounds, tender whispering rhythms, looting the imagination. Sheikh Jarrah drenched in skunk water, swelling streets of suitcases, Palestinians kneel a prayer. The mosque is a cloud, dispossession, robbed, coated bullets. It's a particular kind of evil to burn a mosque during Ramadan. Demonstrations pulsing during the pandemic that is poverty, howling hearts battling the mounting police presence in Colombia. Earthquakes do not know how to pronounce the word border, breaking buildings and man-made laws, Haitians hanging on a hope for homeland, for security. You cannot deport disaster. Unnatural is the sea level rising, is the forest on fire. This poem is a passport, a portal, a prayer, a protest in a palm, hissing of gentle dreams, sweating the brow, wages worn on a wrinkled woman's face, waiting, waiting, waiting at the bus stop, balancing the weight of her love in her arms and hardened hands, ingredients packed in heavy grocery bags, how to feed a country care. Kidnapped from the candle in her lover's eyes, every horizon is a distant hug, hushing the heart with possibility. Democracy is the devil's advocate, an American illusion in the desert, the migrant's mirage, humanity's mirror, whispering in the wind of wishes, wet cheekbones, dampened by the dust of dignity. This ground we walk on, this ground is a graveyard gardened by the government. The children can see through the politicians' gossip, a newspaper ancient as the spirits in their elder scars. The future is a memory yawning from the library of a little boy's laughter. Courage is the confidence to look corruption through the mask of its averted gaze. Your voice, may your voice be the poem that pens the people's path, a siren sitting in the silence within, visions dangling over borders. A wall can be a weapon or a doorway. Every person knows the language of living or loss or lies littering the soul. Be a truth teller, be shameless as the shape of sunlight begging the plants to grow and the fruits to fall. Freedom isn't a dream, it isn't what people fight for, it is the very fight to be that frees us. It is the being, it is the having been, how we kill a country by commenting on our connections, our long to be community, our long to be together. The final frontier is the mind, and as much as we can, I pray that we see our imaginations as a part of the dreaming. We are the dreaming, and how we imagine the world we want to see is what determines the world that awaits us. So I pray on your imaginations with me today. This next poem is for the Borinquen people, for the people that Aida brought up earlier. So this is for Puerto Rico. The perfect storm empties a country of abuelitas, padres, hermanos, mujeres, y niños. A disaster that doesn't seem so natural. Waves of wind damage homes, hovering roofs made of tarp. If you wanted to take land from a people bent on resisting colonialism, insert McDonald's, Walmart, or the Jones Act, or blame it on a storm of a woman named Maria who grew up in Spanish Harlem, who reminded us of the Western story that as the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. Never mind the wealth that ain't so common under the foot of US force, the way loss runs through steep hillsides or rivers swell the veins between vacant towns. We blame the thirsty, but not the corporations that tax water, the shocking doctrines of profit over people, exploited tunes and tones of Taino rhythms, tourism and escapism. Por la isla de Encanta, we lament the Borinquen tongue in power outages of Spanglish, cursing the companies that set the colonial conditions. For the prayers and litanies, tears like rosary beads in the sewers of sorrows where phantasmas sing from the sore throat blueness of blood, the border between refugee and nomad. Migration is the art of fleeing sad songs for blooming in suitcases. La gente fuerte and worn wondrous. We belong to each other before any notion of a nation. We belong to each other before any notion of a nation. No one will understand the tangled truths of being from here and nowhere, the beaming coquille that still visits in dreams. They won't write us in history if we don't write ourselves. They won't write us in history if we don't write ourselves. They won't write us in history if we don't write ourselves. The uncle who drowned in Coronas or ham sandwiches, visions of playing pro baseball, or the aunt who claps the roof of her mouth when she speaks asthmatic and always, always, always high, who lost 6 children to the government, or abuela who is always working 2, 3 jobs to make up for the guilt of coming to America and how she couldn't face returning to no running water. And still, there are spirits who know every chupacabra has its day. It is time for us to take the red fire of our wounds and weapon our mouths toward new movement songs. Remember Campos suffering in silence, separated by an ocean and a language, yet still free in the love of a people fearless and unafraid. It is always a hurricane before the grand exodus, the fight for dignity and independence. San Siraco rattling in every room of revisionist history. Palante, people. Palante, milagros de movimiento, soar, because if we are to live, let it be with the fierce force of knowing that anything that is worth, anything that is sacred, is worth fighting for. We the people are worth fighting for. Bienvenido a la lucha. I'm gonna end there. Thank you so much for having me here. I believe that we will win. I've been to the future and we've won. Know that time is not linear. The Western colonial project could never take our spirits away from us. Bring your customs, bring your language, bring your food, bring your culture. Where we are going, you are there with us. And so keep fighting, keep living, keep dreaming. That's what we need right now. We need you to dream, we need you to imagine. Freedom is on our tongues, freedom is in our hands, freedom is in your step. It's how you walk, it's how you love, it's how you show up every day. Love each other and be the dream we're waiting for. Thank you so much.
Ashe, sister. Give it up for her one more time. We need it. That was the word. Oh, this has been so inspiring. And as I make my grand exit, I just want to say thank you for sharing this space with me. I really appreciate each and every one of you and your energy. If I got to speak to you or not, I know that you're here because you care. And that means the world to someone like me, who for me it's over. My dad and I are where we are, and I'm in my 40s. My father is an older man, but there are a lot of little kids who are in the same situation that I was in. And I hope that we can see a better world for them. Yes? I just need you to agree. So now I have the privilege of also introducing another powerhouse. I am, as a stand-up comedian, it's pretty humbling to be in a space with you people who do this for a living, because I get to visit with it, and then I go back to doing my jokes at the comedy club, and you continue to do the work. And it is very important for those of us who are artists and entertainers who make a living off of the stuff that we do, that we remember when we step into these spaces with you, that we move out the way and allow you to do your work, because you don't get to step away from it. And so I am honored to be in the presence of the people who do that. And I want to say that I see you, and I just want to use my platform to make a way for you, not to be in your way. So that's very important for me, and I had to get that out. This next man coming to the stage has been in this fight for a very long time. He's a leader in the community. He's a distinguished professor at community college in New York. And an amazing school network in New York. Some really powerful people come from there. I went to New York to take my special. That's where I taped it. And I went to all of the community colleges because I wanted to take my special in the community with the people who reflect where I come from. Many of the leaders who are here are in his book. And if you don't have it, you should get it. I ordered it 5 minutes ago because I didn't know about it. And I don't lie to you and act like I did, but I'm going to read it. I don't lie. That's what gets me in trouble in Hollywood. But anyway, he wrote this book. Many of the people who are here are in the book. It's called Immigration Matters, Movements, Visions, and Strategies for a Progressive Future. And that's what I'm all about. I want you to put your hands together. And when I say don't stop clapping till they reach the mic, I mean that, because that energy is what fuels the fire. You saw what just happened with Aida. We're going to keep that energy going, and we're going to shut it down, and then we're going to go out into the world, and we're going to shut that down. So it is with great pleasure that I bring to the stage Mr. Deepak Bhargava. Let's go. Bhargava.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters and siblings. Great to see you. So I am fired up about this afternoon session because, as you know, as you did the work, BIPOC communities and immigrant communities saved multiracial democracy in America in 2020. I think that deserves a little more applause than that, don't you? That was a lot of work. Now, here's the tough part. The work is not over. White supremacy is still on the march in America. Authoritarianism is still on the march in America. And BIPOC communities, immigrant communities are on the front line of that struggle. So today's session is really a chance for us to learn from what happened in 2020, what meaning do we make of it, what worked, what was hard, what do we never need to do again, in order to inform our ongoing struggle for justice and liberation in this country. So we have an all-star panel, and I'm going to ask them all to come up. Mario Udeddia is Unite Here's National Field Director. He ran some of the largest political programs in the country over the last couple of years, and I had the pleasure of door knocking with Unite Here in Philadelphia, and Unite Here do not play, let me tell you. We have the amazing Laura Martin, the Executive Director of the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, a visionary leader and organizer who leads us forward. Dr. Manuel Pastor, who is a Distinguished Professor of Sociology and American Studies and Ethnicity at USC, is one of our leading public intellectuals on immigrant integration and social justice and economic justice in this country. We have the incredible Emcee Ufat of the New Georgia Project, New Georgia Project Action Fund, one of the very best organizers and strategists working anywhere in America today. And we have Marissa Torona, who is president of Grantmakers Concerned with Immigrants and Refugees. She has a deep and profound immigrant lineage herself and has some profound agitations and provocations for how philanthropy needs to show up at this moment of democratic crisis. So let's give it up to the panel. And I'm going to ask each of them an opening question, and shrinking your time down here, so about 5 minutes apiece for the first go round, yeah? And so, Mario, I'm going to start with you. What did we learn in 2020? What did we do? What did we learn? And what are some of the implications for that as we carry the struggle forward?
That's what's up. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes. Hello. Cool. So real quick, before we address the question, just want to say on behalf of Unite Here and the Culinary Workers Union, Local 226, welcome to Las Vegas. Please wear a mask for your safety and the safety of others around you. When you're around other people, please remember to tip your guest room attendant and your banquet server. And just need to say that, look, since the onset of the pandemic, the Culinary Workers Union, 60,000 people strong here in Las Vegas, Nevada, has been fighting to make sure that we don't die and that we get free. And that has meant protecting workers and their families in the midst of crisis. from food assistance to making sure that there are in fact mask mandates in establishments like the Westgate, to passing state statutes. Just know that the people who are serving you today are in the struggle, have been in the struggle, helped deliver the state for Biden-Harris. And there's still 35% of the union that isn't working right now, that is still laid off. We want to welcome you back to Las Vegas. We want guests and the industry to rebound well. We need people to wear their masks. People are ready to serve you. Thank you. Okay, so look, what did we learn in 2020? 3 quick things. First, we learned that in the spirit of some of the art that we just experienced together, working class people of color and immigrants were protagonists in defeating Trump. Deepak said it quite directly, right? The Hospitality Workers Union, we're 307,000 people strong in Canada and the United States. We're majority immigrant, we're majority people of color, we're majority women. We come from 178 countries, we speak 50 different languages. And we've been in the fight with our sisters and brothers in this room on this Zoom, from the Adios Arpaio campaign, from the 2003 Immigrant Workers Freedom Ride. I know there's some older heads out here who remember those things too. Of course, Working Families United and our collaboration with so many other people in here, right, to make sure that there's a path to citizenship. We were participants in getting rid of Donald Trump. We knocked on 4.6 million doors in Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Florida, and in the US, Georgia Senate runoffs with the sister to my left and her leadership. And I just want to go through a couple of the margins. Donald Trump lost this state by 34,000 votes. We moved 44,000 infrequent voters to help make that happen, right? Donald Trump lost Arizona by, I want to get it right, 10,000 votes, right? United here, Local 11 moved 48,000 infrequent voters. That work of moving our people, of having challenging conversations, was what we needed to do face to face in order to win. But we needed to do more than that. We need to build a permanent organization. And so, look, we're at the 20th anniversary of the beginning of a momentous moment in Las Vegas, Nevada, which was the Frontier Strike. 6 years, 4 months, 10 days, not a single worker at the frontier crossed the picket line, right? And there was a moment on the 2020 Take Back campaign when a young worker from the Stratosphere Hotel, a person named Rocha, knocked the door of Louise Tostin, a frontier striker, who came out and brought her plaque commemorating that momentous moment, right? And Rocha had never been on LOA with our union before, worked at the Strat for less than 10 years. And that moment connecting the struggle of the frontier, this moment that for this city, not just for our union, was so foundational to defeating Trump, was the kind of permanent organization that we need. We learned from 2020, Deepak, that we need to go further than just an in-cycle electoral program. The other thing we learned from 2020 is that we can't take our communities for granted. The shift among working class people of color to Trump was real. I think that we should also be precise and nuanced about this, right? To take the Latinx community, it was not a shift that can be described in a single way. There were at least 2 things happening. There were some vote switchers, yes, from 2016 Clinton to 2020 Trump. But there were also conservative Latinx people who had not cast ballots before, who came out to vote. And to name one core contradiction in the time that I have left that maybe will be a provocation for my colleagues on the panel, some research from Emcee Labs indicates that part of why conservative Latinx folks voted for Trump had to do with him toning down the anti-immigration stuff and ramping up the anti-Black crime and violence stuff in the final 6 months, right? We need to confront that head on. And we need, what that really demands, to conclude, is that we get a $3.5 trillion reconciliation package, that we make permanent the so-called child tax credit, which is really a universal basic child allowance. We need our elected officials to deliver working class communities of color and immigrants with material gains. That's what we need. Also, just want to give a shout out because there are workers in motion right now at HelloFresh, the biggest meal kit company in the United States. The boss is pushing back on them. go on Twitter, support HelloFresh workers, and call on your elected officials to please do the same. That struggle for those 1,200 workers in Richmond and Colorado is the kind of struggle we need if we're going to protect small d democracy going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Laura, what did we learn in 2020?
So I think we learned in 2020, it's kind of also harkening back to how Plan was founded, with this recognition of local activists that our voting electorate was about 80% white, which definitely was not the reflection of the people, eligible voters in the state. And so local activists put forth this mission to deepen democracy in Nevada and set about doing that by removing artificial barriers to participation. So, expanding early voting, automatic restoration of rights, a bunch of different things. But I think what we really learned in 2020 is power concedes nothing. I think what we saw on January 6th, the attacks on the Capitol in DC, was the expected outcome of an ideology, of a culture who can't comprehend people of color, women, and immigrants deciding their own future through democracy. This was a system that they used to keep us out of the decision-making process, to keep us under their heel, and now it's being used to actually elect people who look like us. Nevada had the first female majority legislature in the country, which now 62% of our legislature identify as female. So what does that mean? Childcare, doula services, things to address Black mortality rates, and really women and family and kitchen table centered issues. That's not going to happen if our legislature is 60 or 80% men. Sorry, men, but these are the issues that we deal with every day. We want to problem solve it, we want to address it. And so 2020 really showed us that I think our democracy is fragile. I don't think January 6th was an end. I think it was a dress rehearsal. Even in our state, our failed one-term Attorney General, Adam Laxalt, sued our state 12 times and lost 12 times. He is now deciding to run for US Senate, and he announced last month. And he also announced last month he is preemptively going to take legal action against the state for voter fraud next year. So this is what they're going to do. They know they can't win on the issues. They know the demographics aren't in their favor. So they're going to try to steal their vote. They're going to try to make things as confusing as possible. And it's not something funny, though I'm not mad at anybody who wants to laugh at Adam Laxalt. He is a huge joke in this state. However, it is something serious that our democracy could be so fragile that people can pick it apart using the courts that have been stacked with conservatives for the past 30 years, that can try to get into positions in county boards, secretaries of state, to really mess with the process. And really, a lot of the organizing we do, especially with New Americans, is about building trust in a system that may not be relatable to people because you come from a different country. And what does it say now? We're supposed to be the freest country, the example of democracy, when someone like Trump or someone like Adam Laxalt can completely try to tear it apart and threaten it, and basically admit, I can't win fair and square, so I'm going to start cheating. So we really have to start taking that seriously. And definitely, that is a lesson that Plan has taken from 2020 and into 2021 and into 22 about really protecting our democracy and taking these threats seriously.
That was powerful. Thank you, Laura. Manuel.
Well, I'm going to start by saying one thing I learned in 2021, which is you really shouldn't follow Asia Monet as a panel. She was able this morning to write a poem that's going to be much better than anything I'm going to deliver, having worked for 25 years on the notes I'm presenting today. And it's a delight to be in a room with actual human beings. I don't know how other people feel about that. And it's a special treat to wear a shirt with a collar, which I have not done for 18 months. And then last prefatory statement, I want to thank Emcee, my good friend, for delivering our country from fascism. And unfortunately, leaving me full-time contemplating now, what the hell is Kristen Sinema thinking? So let me say briefly what I think we pulled out of 2020 and 2021. It's already been said. Integrated voter engagement works. Community organizing, Media.gov, it's worked in Arizona, it worked obviously in Georgia, and I would highlight that it just worked in California with the recall. And special shout out to Sheila, among others, who's in the room, who worked so hard. And in particular, the discipline in that campaign is something to pay attention to. It was a discipline that said, this is not about defending a particular political figure, but it is about defending California values of inclusion and immigrant rights. And I think that kind of discipline, where we recognize that it's not about candidates, but about issues, will be very important. One thing that Maya pointed to that I think is really important to pay attention to is the tendency toward authoritarianism may be steeped in white supremacy, but it's not limited to white people. The Latino vote moved, but so did the Black male vote as well. And these are issues that we need to take seriously going forward. What is the work we need to do about the patriarchal temptations that were put there by Trump, but also the point that Mario made about continuing the struggle against anti-Black racism within other communities of color. I'm going to do something unusual for an academic, which is two things. I'm not going to repeat what other people have already said. That's an academic specialty. I'm also not going to go overtime. What I know Emcee is like, damn. What I do want to say is something for us to be thinking about going forward. And that is, what is our economic narrative? And I want to say two things about that that's really important. We often have an economic narrative of fairness and inclusion, and we often accept that somehow that's going to come at the cost of prosperity. We need to reject that. When we are inclusive and when we are fair, we build a more prosperous economy. The kind of caring economy that's being talked about, and it shouldn't be called a reconciliation bill because that just sounds boring. It should be talked about the caring economy bill. It's about child care. It's about elder care. It's about healthcare, more healthcare for seniors. It's about free community college, which is caring for our young people by creating an opportunity for them to succeed. When we make those investments, we all win, our economy grows, and we need to be owning that message. The last thing I'll say is we need to be very careful because of the shifts in immigration that are ongoing. Because of the climate crisis, because of the violence in the Northern Triangle, we're going to be getting a lot of folks who are arriving who are not going to be able to immediately contribute to our economy. And we've fallen into an economic narrative about defending immigrants as essential workers who contribute. And yes, they are. But you're an essential human being, even if you don't work. And those who are going to be arriving at our shores in years to come and at our borders are going to be people fleeing climate disasters, fleeing political and economic chaos, and who are going to need our love and our assistance. And we need an economics that's not just based on what you contribute, but an economics of mutuality, of caring, and of creating a society and an economy that builds up all of us.
Powerful. Thank you. Thank you, Manuel. Emcee, what did we learn?
Okay, so I am the child of a Nigerian poet and a Nigerian politician. And so brevity is not in my birthright, but I'm gonna exercise some discipline today and try to keep it to this 5 minutes. So what did we learn in 2020? Organizing gets the goods, full stop, right? Full stop.
I remember when our founder, Stacey Abrams, launched New Georgia Projects in 2013. The original ambition for the New Georgia Project was to register a whole bunch of Georgians of color, Black and brown folks, who had never had employer-provided health insurance for the Affordable Care Act. And it was launching, and we needed people to sign up and register. And then you go, you knock on people's doors, you tell people what the opportunity is, and they look back at you and they're like, this is super expensive and it doesn't cover anything. I'm good, thank you, bye, right? And after having that conversation over and over again, they were successful. We were able to add numbers of people to Georgia's version of the Affordable Care Act. But the truth of the matter is that it didn't cover what needed to be covered. And it was super expensive. And it wasn't because of what was happening in Washington, D.C., although that definitely had something to do with it. But it was the legislators down in the Capitol in Atlanta who were literally leaving billions of dollars on the table because of their political and their ideological opposition to what they derisively call Obamacare. So guess what? We have the ability to hire and fire these elected officials, right? And we don't act like it. This is our power that we regularly and routinely leave on the table as we're thinking about the Georgia, the Nevada, the Arizona, the country that we want to live in, that we deserve to live in. And so we got to work. You start looking, you realize that there were 1.2 million Black and brown Georgians who were eligible to vote and not participating in our elections, not registered to vote. So we said, guess what? We're going to register them all, right? Now, we haven't registered all 1.2 million, but we have registered 600,000 of them in all 159 Georgia counties, right? And here's the thing. People are like, oh, but you guys just did voter registration. No, we don't, right? That it is about voter registration. It's about voter education. It's about voter mobilization, right? And not to elect Democrats, because that ain't exactly got, it doesn't exactly give what it's supposed to give all the time, just giving out. We organize, we register people to vote, we participate in our elections because we have a vision for our communities, for our states that serves us, that serves our families. And we want to elect folks who not only come from our communities, but who feel accountable to us, right? Who would rather die, right, than make sure that there's any daylight between their leadership and the communities that they're supposed to serve, right? So it's not about electing Democrats, it's about electing people who will co-govern with the people, right? And so that's who we are. We are the ones that we've been waiting for, right? When the election of November 2020 happened and they called the state of Georgia for President Biden, we received 10,000 requests to volunteer within the first 72 hours. And we were able to staff them all, we were able to place them all, because guess what? Because we're continuing to organize. Because we built the infrastructure that was necessary, that was required to take advantage of this moment, right? That when you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, right? So we were ready. That this vision that we have for Georgia, this vision that we have for the South, this vision that we have for the country, we're gonna work for it. We're going to organize for it. We're going to build the structures, build the teams that are required to make it our reality. And that's what I learned from 2020.
Emcee 2020 carried right over to 2021. Thank goodness.
Longest year ever.
Great. Marissa.
So I think relative to philanthropy's role, what we learned in 2020 is that philanthropy did some things well. Most of what was done well was done by Black and brown funders, and that there's still more that needs to be done. So in terms of what philanthropy has done well is that there's been a growing recognition that organizing gets the goods. So more money needs to go to grassroots building, power building, base building in localities and in states. I think that more philanthropic institutions recognize the important connection between addressing disinformation and protecting our democracy. And I think that more philanthropic institutions recognize the power of investing in the independent political power of immigrants, migrants, and refugees. Now, that being said, it was really a smaller, albeit very powerful cohort of BIPOC, social justice funders who've been leading these efforts, right? So there's still a lot more that needs to get done. And along those lines, one of the things that philanthropy needs to do looking forward is that it needs to unleash the capital. Yes, please talk to that. I think that's really important. And you know, as somebody who has been in philanthropy for a while, but when I'm explaining this to folks who aren't in the sector, saying things like the importance of multi-year general operating support can sometimes be really confusing, because why would you move money in ways that had restrictions or attachments attached to them? And so looking forward, we know, actually not even looking forward, looking at what was achieved in 2020 and prior, the ability to build multiracial durable coalitions relies on the ability and availability of flexible funding, right? So we know that philanthropy can really step up to the plate by ensuring and sustaining movement infrastructure that exists beyond a single election cycle. So philanthropy needs to unleash the capital. It also needs to make sure that it unleashes the capital at the local and state levels. In my role as president of Grantmakers Concerned with Immigrants and Refugees, among other things, we really talk about moving money and power, and moving money and power not just at the national level. We know there's a lot of opportunity at the national level, but we also know that the implementation of any of the wins that are getting achieved, as you just described, happen in municipalities, in cities, in counties, and at the state level. So our job is to try to convince as many national funders as possible to move money to the local and state work that's getting done. And finally, I would say that what philanthropy also needs to do in unleashing the capital is unleash the capital to groups that have been historically excluded in philanthropic conversations as it relates to immigration, migration, and refugee issues. Black immigrants, trans migrants, indigenous migrants. There are a lot of folks who haven't been at the table in the conversation. And one of the things we're committed to at GSER is to making sure not only that we're amplifying the work of communities that have been historically excluded, but making sure that we're helping to build the table to make it as wide as possible for all of us to move this work forward. So really my big takeaway is for philanthropy, I know this is being live streamed, unleash the capital, lower the barriers to accessing that money, move the money, move the power.
That was clear, powerful. Thank you. So I'm hearing some really important lessons. Organizing delivers the goods. We need full year-round permanent infrastructure in communities to do it. That Democrats have to deliver real change that people can feel in their lives. It can't just be a cycle of going and ask people for their votes. There actually has to be real change on economics, on immigration. I'm hearing that we have to have some real conversations about issues like anti-Blackness, patriarchy in our communities. And I'm hearing that this authoritarian threat is no joke, that they are actually playing for keeps. And we need to act like that's the level of the stakes. So in this last few minutes, I just want to do a quick lightning round. What do we need to do differently to show up for this moment in history that we now find ourselves in? Anybody would like to go in a minute or less?
Some are there. I will say one of the things that we've done is thinking about joy and culture. That we are trying to change the culture of voting. We're trying to change the culture of participation in our elections. And so thinking about culture and joy as a way to sustain ourselves, thinking about love, the love that we have for ourselves, for our families and our communities as a power source. Like, I can tell you all of the things I hate, all the people that I hate, all the music that I hate, all the food that I hate. I'm very good at that. I'm very facile with it. It stays on the tip of my tongue, right? But oftentimes when I talk about love, like there are times that, sometimes it's challenging and it's difficult for us. And we need to keep doing it. We need to remember who we are, who we love, why, because that is the thing that will sustain us. You can't have tables in front of Walmart every weekend and just like regularly registering people to vote. It gets boring. It's difficult to recruit people into the work. If it's not fun, if it's not interesting, if it's not engaging, if it's not tapped in to the real change that people want to see in their lives. And so why we do this work is because we love ourselves and because we want to be powerful. We want to be powerful enough to stop bad things from happening. We want to be powerful enough to build the world that our families deserve. And so love and power are sustainable, power sources, energy sources that we need to tap into, and they last a lot longer than hate and frustration.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Joy is a source of power. Manuel?
I'll just start by saying I love Emcee, so that's a good start. The thing I wanted to lift up, and I think this is also for the funders who might be on the stream, is that when we talk about power building, that's important, but particularly given the threat from the other side, it's also about reducing other people's power over our lives. And a concrete power analysis is, yes, build up your own power, but restrict the ability of others to overrule elections, to move their wealth to other countries, to mistreat their workers by not allowing unionization, etc. And so the message I would leave is that we need to have a big heart of inclusion and solidarity, and we need to have a hard head of innovation and strategy to actually change the world.
Powerful. Thank you for that, Manuel. Take their power away. Who'd like to go next?
Risks and struggle and pushing. I'm thinking about Rocha again. Sorry, I keep invoking Rocha from the stratosphere. Who, after that moment with Louise Tostin, the frontier striker, right, got pushed to go to Atlanta, right, to miss Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, and Hanukkah, absolutely, and Festivus for the rest of us. And it actually took 1,700 people, right, to do that for us. And given the level of depletion that many of us felt after the November election, that was hard to imagine. For those workers at HelloFresh in this moment and what is uncertain in front of them, that is hard to imagine, and we need to push ourselves and each other and our organizations and the funders to take those risks, to say yes, like Rocha did.
Joy, power, risk and struggle.
So unleash the capital, and I would hope that more funders would invest resources in spaces where people can prefigure the world that we want. This is very much building on the idea of joy, and I'm borrowing those words from my friend Trish Choom with the Robert Sterling Clark Foundation, but we need more space so that people can continue to imagine a different world than what we have now.
Thank you. Imagination. Wonderful. Thank you, Marissa.
Sure.
Co-sign to what everyone says, and I also think to not be afraid of tension. From tension comes learning, and I think that we should never be afraid to stop learning, but also not be afraid to imagine the world of not necessarily what we do or do not deserve, but the world that is possible. There's a lot that's possible, and I think definitely a habit of white supremacy is to believe is what we have is what is the best that we'll ever get. And I know that we can dream bigger than that, and we can do more together.
Amazing. Joy, power, risk, tension, imagination. Let's give it up for this amazing group of ladies. Oh, that wasn't very much. That was some bombshell ideas. Let's give it up. Before I go, we are going to hear a message from another one of our congressional champions. Congresswoman Norma Torres is going to speak to us by video.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Norma Torres. It is my honor to join you for the 2021 National Immigrant Integration Conference. I would like to thank the National Partnership for New Americans member organizations for all of the work that you do to advance immigrant and refugee rights and integration. As you may know, I came to the United States as a little girl, growing up in California, later getting a job and raising a family. I felt as American as anyone else. Then California's discriminatory Proposition 187 came around and attempted to make undocumented immigrants ineligible for public benefits. Suddenly, I realized that no matter how loudly I spoke or how hard I fought to make my community a better place, I didn't have a vote, I didn't have power. So I signed up to take the citizenship test and took the classes because I wanted to make sure that I was going to do things right. Passing that test, securing my place as a citizen in this country, and using the rights my citizenship guarantees me is part of why I am in Congress today. Those of us who come from countries where the basic rights of citizenship are threatened, who have at any point felt powerless in this country, we've come to love and consider our own. We know how important it is to get involved and speak out for those who can't. Immigrants make our country better. They've made this country what it is, and immigrants arriving today are no different from immigrants who came to this country generations ago. Immigrants work day and night, rain or shine, and even through a pandemic to build our nation and serve our communities. And yet are faced with the unfair high cost of citizenship. We immigrate here to work hard, to provide for our families, improve our communities, and achieve the American dream. Those actions should not come at a high cost. That is why I just introduced the Reduced Financial Barriers to Immigration and Citizenship Act, along with 15 other colleagues, to make the naturalization process accessible no matter what your income level may be. This bill would waive fees for naturalization applications for income-eligible immigrants, including essential workers, and codify existing fee waivers issued administratively by USCIS, so they cannot be eliminated, and include funding for USCIS operations and tackle the case backlog. I am looking forward to continuing to work with allies like the National Partnership for New Americans to help us do what immigrants have always done: work hard and do our part to make this country and our democracy strong, vibrant, and resilient. Thank you to the National Partnership for New Americans for inviting me to speak today and for your continued support of these critical issues.
Thank you so much, friends. Let's give it up again for that incredible panel of experts and movement leaders, and to Aja Monet and Aida Rodriguez for their inspiring words at the top of this session. And we'll see you back here at 4:30. I want to remind you that track sessions are going to begin in about 15 minutes. Enjoy the rest of your